Have you ever felt like you're just stuck, repeating the same patterns, even when you know they aren't good for you? Well, in this explainer, we're going to unpack that. We're going to look at the deep-seated blueprints that shape our lives and figure out not just why we get stuck, but how we can finally get free.
So let's start with the big one. Why do we do this? Why do we find ourselves in these loops that just hurt? Honestly, it gets to the very heart of being human. And understanding the answer, that's the first, and I mean the most crucial step toward making any real change.
The psychologist Albert Ellis came up with this total game-changing idea. He said it's not what happens to us that makes us miserable, but what we tell ourselves about what happens. Now that's a powerful thought, right? Because it shifts the focus away from stuff we can't control and puts it right back on our own minds, the one thing we actually can control.
Okay, so if it's our faulty thinking, where does that even come from? We're going to start by looking at what you could call our invisible rulebook. It's this subconscious script that gets written for us long before we even know what's going on, usually right in our own family.
Our early environment, well, it makes all the difference. Some of us grow up with really rigid rules where secrets are a big deal and nobody ever talks about conflict. But others might grow up in a healthier space that's more flexible, where conflict gets resolved and there's room for change. The environment we're raised in becomes the very first map we're ever given for how to navigate the world.
And those early lessons, they harden into what psychologists call injunctions. These are all the unspoken oughts and shoulds that get programmed into our subconscious. They become these internal rules that, a lot of the time, without us even realizing it, act like roadblocks that keep us trapped in those same old patterns.
I mean, just think about the power of these commands. Don't feel, don't trust, don't succeed, or maybe the worst one, don't be you. When we internalize these messages as kids, they can subconsciously put a ceiling on our potential and dictate our behavior for years and years, creating the very cycles we're trying so hard to break.
So we have this invisible script from our past. Got it. But what's the engine that keeps it running day in and day out? Let's take a look at the psychological forces that are really driving our actions.
Okay, first up is positive reinforcement. And this one's pretty straightforward. When you do something and you get a reward for it, like, praise from your boss or just a paycheck, you're way more likely to do it again. Something good is added, and that reinforces the behavior. Simple enough.
Now, negative reinforcement, this is the one that trips everybody up. It is not punishment. It's when you do something that makes a bad feeling go away. The classic example is taking an aspirin for a headache. The removal of the pain is what reinforces the behavior of taking the aspirin. You learn that this action gives you an escape.
So how does this all play out in real time? Well, we can use this thing called the ABC model to understand it. Imagine A, the activating event. A person is abandoned as a child. Now let's jump all the way to C, the emotional consequence. They feel rejected, depressed, have low self-esteem. But what's the bridge between them? That's B, the belief system. It's the story they tell themselves. I am to blame. If I were lovable, they would have wanted me.
And this is where it all comes together. This is the whole point. We can't always change the activating event. The A is often in the past. But we have incredible power over the B, our beliefs. By challenging that inner critic, by changing our self-talk, we can fundamentally change our emotional consequences. We can literally change our own destiny.
Okay, now that we kind of get the mechanics of our thinking, let's turn to our emotions. How do we navigate these huge, powerful feelings like grief and anger and turn them from triggers that trap us into tools that actually help us grow?
So when we experience a loss, Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's model gives us a kind of map. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and finally acceptance. The really key thing to remember here is that this is not some neat, step-by-step checklist. People bounce back and forth between these stages. It's messy, but it's all part of the process of working toward acceptance.
And what about anger? A lot of the time, anger is just a bodyguard for more vulnerable feelings. Think of it as a secondary emotion. So when you feel that flash of anger, it's a super powerful signal to just pause and ask yourself, what's really under this? Am I feeling hurt? Am I scared? Am I feeling disrespected? See, anger usually follows a pretty predictable chain reaction. It starts with a trigger. This leads to our thoughts, the story we tell ourselves. Those thoughts create our feelings, which then drive our behaviors, leading, of course, to the consequences. And just notice, right there in the middle of that whole chain are our thoughts.
That's the one spot where we have the most power to step in and change the entire outcome.
When we're in a conflict, it is so tempting to reach for these behaviors, isn't it? Blame, name-calling, bringing up old stuff. But here's the thing. These aren't problem-solving tools. They are problem-solving barriers. They just shift the focus from the issue to attacking the other person. And that just locks us in a cycle of negativity instead of moving us toward an actual solution. So we've unpacked our past. We've looked at our emotional patterns. Now for the most important part, the solution. How do we actively start rewriting our script and building a stronger, more resilient version of ourselves?
It all starts on the inside, with our mind. This means actively working to shut down that self-criticism, replacing scary thoughts with positive images, and just treating our own mind with a little kindness. It's really about becoming our own biggest cheerleader instead of our own worst critic.
And that internal shift, it's got to be supported by our actions on the outside. Taking care of our bodies, having the strength to actually ask for help when we need it, and engaging in the really powerful practices of forgiveness, and intentionally letting go of the patterns that just don't work for us anymore.
You know, it's so important to understand that building self-esteem isn't just some nice-to-have, fluffy thing. It is fundamental to making lasting change. Think of it as your internal safeguard, like a psychological immune system that protects you from falling back into those old destructive patterns when life gets hard.
And here are some really practical ways you can start building it. Let go of perfectionism. It's a trap. Keep a running list of your achievements, no matter how big or small. Visualize your success. And maybe most importantly, anchor your sense of self-worth on your own internal values, not on the constantly shifting opinions of other people. And I have to say, this entire framework for understanding ourselves comes from the incredible work done by BEAAPS, that's Behavioral Education and Awareness Programs. This whole explainer is based on their Relapse Prevention Workbook, which provides these amazing tools for growth and change.
You know, we all build these walls around ourselves, right? They're made of old beliefs and fears and patterns, and they can feel so solid, so permanent, but they're not. They were built one stone at a time, and they can be taken down the exact same way. So I'll just leave you with this question. What's one stone, just one, that you can remove from your wall starting today?